Hello and welcome back to Mark's House and Garden UK. It is February and it's cold and I'm bored with winter, but spring is just around the corner, so I thought it might be a nice idea to have a look back at last year, at all the projects which I shared with you on my gardening journey. So I've put together a montage of video clips with a narration, and hopefully this will put us all in the mood for the gardening year ahead. And one of the first jobs I always do every spring is prune the buddleia and add the cuttings to the twig pile for the wildlife. When that buddleia starts sprouting, I know that spring is here. And one thing I realised last year was that my wildlife pond was just a little bit exposed to the elements. So I hatched a cunning plan to make this an enclosed space. And as you can see, it involves a mini digger. What I've decided to do is create a moat, a series of 3 ponds in a horseshoe shape around the periphery of my existing wildlife pond. And the spoil from those holes will create mounds, and I will plant into those mounds large trees and shrubs, so we will have an enclosed space. Now there will be a gateway. I've left some earth where the mini digger is sitting right there so that you can enter the space. But it will have the appearance of a single body of water because I'll put a bridge across that piece of soil. I wanted to get planting quite early so that the plants could get established. So you can see there's the hole without any water in it. That will be a pond one day. And I'm now planting some ferns and some fatsias. Now they will need more shade. There's far too much light for them as they are there. And you'll see in a moment that I've taken care of that by planting some additional plants on the top of the mound. I had a go at some outside cookery this year. My neighbour gave me some courgettes. So I bought a little hob and made some zucchini fritti. So it was half an hour from the plant to the plate, and I really enjoyed the experience. I'll probably do more of that this year. This is one of those shade-giving plants for around the pond. It's a tree fern, and I'm about to plant 2 tree ferns to form a kind of gateway, an entrance to this kind of Jurassic wildlife zone in the bottom corner of the garden. It's also a bit of an experiment, this, because those tree ferns don't really like to be outside in the open air. They want to be under the shade of a canopy. But I've put them in bright sunlight. But they did seem to do okay, I have to say, during the course of the year. When I moved in, I inherited some large boulders. They were sat around the garden. And I want to use them, again, to enhance the gateway to the Jurassic wildlife zone. But how do you move them? Well, this was my little idea. Series of rollers made out of a banister rail. It was so easy to move them once they had wheels underneath them. And you'll see the full effect in a moment. There they are. I've put 2 griffins, little sculptures there, and that creates an entrance. In the summertime, the wildlife pond really came into its own. We had frogs and toads and newts, and the birds absolutely love being down there. They drink there, they bathe there, they frolic there. I actually had a murmuration of starlings drop on the pond on one particular day, but unfortunately, I didn't manage to catch it on camera. Look at all the insects as well blowing around in the air. There's a starling. And here are 2 blackbirds which are behaving quite territorially, chasing each other around. I think that's what they're doing. And look how close that comes to the camera there. I left my camera in the margins. Wonderful. I love my wildlife pond. Now here I'm putting in another plant with large leaves. This is a tetrapanix. I've put 2 of them in. It's actually a pup from another tetrapanix which I already own in the garden. And they will grow quite big and they will pup around and make new plants, and those large leaves will cast shade over the ferns. That's a Paulonia I'm putting in there. Very large leaves. Foxglove tree, it's his other name. And I'm planting it in the mound again to cast shade. A word of warning with the Paulonia. It grows very, very quickly, and what you're supposed to do is pollard it in the spring, basically cut it back to where the trunk ends. But the problem with that is it stops it from flowering. So this year I'm going to let mine grow, see if I get some flowers on it, and then next year I will pollard it before it gets too big. I bought a bendy tree fern and I want it to reach out over the water's surface in this one of the 3 moats. How do I do that? How do I cantilever it? Well, I put some pegs into the ground. I bought some very heavy duty metal pegs and I put a lattice of rope over it, and I've tied it down. It will eventually make roots and anchor itself, and I'll be able to remove the rope. A black bamboo, which I bought from RHS Harlow Car on the reduce section. Always go to the reduce shelf. This was £100 reduced to 25. When I got it home, I divided it into 4 plants and they've all taken off. So I now have 4 plants for the price of 1 by cutting them half using a saw. And the saw did no harm whatsoever. They've all taken off. Gunnera manicata has now been banned and you're not allowed to plant it. So my solution was to plant it in its pot in a mound of earth so that I get the effect, I keep the plant, but I'm not breaking the law. Now when I put my parterre in the front of the cottage, I had to dig these 2 roses up, and they've been languishing in tubs for about 3 years, quite neglected. Decided to give them another go, so repotted them in quite good quality soil, give them a good prune, and look at the results. All that lovely fresh foliage and those beautiful flowers. I think roses are a lot more robust than they're given credit for. I'm obviously going to have to make a rose garden. Now, this was another project which I started and finished in the year. I wanted an arid bed and I decided to put it here, right next to my parterre. Had to dig all the turf out because I wanted to plant straight into soil. So I removed all the turf, and also those 3 trachycarpus are a little bit too close together. I put them there, hands up. It was a mistake and they're too close together. So I'm also going to separate them. I'm going to dig 2 of them up and leave one of them in place. That will give them more space and it will give me space to plant my arid bed. I was surprised how deep the roots were after being in the ground for only 18 months. I feel a bit sorry for them because they've just got established and I'm ripping them out again, but it is for their own good and they will come back. A little bit of brute force and ignorance required, and as you can see there as I roll it into its new position. What I like about this is there's 2 trachycarpus in the background in the parterre. I hope you can see them. And this kind of brings that theme through and it connects the 2 gardens. I did discover in the process of digging up the trachycarpus some old bottles and some clay pots. Curious, somebody told me that the Victorians used to just bury the waste in the garden. Well, I'm going to put them to good use because I'm going to make a tablescape. A tablescape is basically a flower arrangement that goes up the centre of your table. And you can see there the clay pots and flowers which I cut out of my wildlife mound. This gave me a really good feeling because those flowers, that they were seeded 2 years ago and they keep coming back. And there we are. And here we are enjoying some homemade soup. In between us is the tablescape. It's beautiful and you can see over it and talk to your guests. Now that there is a Yucca rostrata, very spiky, so I've protected myself by tying up the leaves. I'm planting that into my arid bed. Again, I'm planting it proud of the soil surface because I don't want the root ball to be waterlogged at any stage. I'm backfilling the soil, and here is the big reveal. Hey presto. Isn't that a wonderful plant? Now, providing it doesn't get waterlogged, that is bulletproof. It can stay outside all winter long. To the right of the shot there is Cycas revoluta. I've buried that in its pot because that's not hardy and that has to come out every winter. I'm cutting weed fabric here with a soldering iron. A little hack for you there. It melts the weed fabric and stops it from fraying. Now, obviously, weed fabric is not for the purist gardener, but for me, it's going to do a great job here. It will help to retain moisture, suppress weeds, and it will stop the gravel from mixing into the soil. I can plant through it, and in a moment you will see this gravel being placed on top of the weed fabric. The weed fabric will disappear, and I will have an instant garden. Golden gravel. Golden because it also matches the golden gravel which is around my parterre. So again, it's continuity and it brings the space together. Lovely, as you can see there. And this was so satisfying, slicing up the side of that bag with a Stanley knife and watching the gravel spill out in an avalanche. And it won't be long now before I have a gravel garden. Red hot pokers in the foreground there. Strangely, those actually flowered in November, which surprised me. And every time you put a shovel of gravel down, you can see the effect, and you will see the completed effect in a moment. The gravel is about 3 inches deep, and I can separate the gravel and cut through the weed fabric and put any plants in here that I like. Obviously, gravel is not the easiest thing to walk on, so I've put a stepping stone path through, and there we are, a gravel bed, an arid garden. To the left of shot there is a passion flower, which had become very, very entangled and very condensed, so I decided to give it some space by putting some garden wire along the wall on vine eyes. Inserted a roll plug, put in the vine eye, and then I spent probably about an hour untangling the passion flower and separating it out. But aren't they spectacular, those blooms? I counted around about 80 of those on that one plant. You've got to keep it really well watered in the summertime or the flowers will just drop off. And there's your before shot, and here is your after. And it grew and grew and grew and covered that whole wall, and it was wonderful. Asparagus. I planted it 2 years ago, so really this was the first year I was able to harvest it. I've already had one crop. This is my second crop, and I'm about to cook it. Those are free-range hen's eggs from my neighbour's hens. She often gives me hen's eggs. It's a real treat, and again, I'm going to cook that asparagus outdoors, and it will be literally 20 minutes from the plant to the plate. Poached a couple of hen's eggs, laid the asparagus across the top, and then sat in my courtyard and enjoyed it with a little bit of salt on. It was wonderful. I'll be doing more outdoor cooking this year, I think. Really enjoyed it. Now we're getting to the end now, and this is the last project I'm going to share with you. I got a tip off that Costco were selling olives. I've always wanted one of these mature olive trees, but they've always been a little bit outside my price range. My local garden centre sells these at £1,200 each. Costco were selling them for £400, so I made an investment. I bought 3 for £1,200. I think I got 3 for the price of 1. Well, that's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. And happily, YouTube videos will contribute towards the cost over the years. But how am I going to plant them? Well, I've enrolled the help of my friendly local farmer and his tractor, and he is about to make light work of it. Wrapped them in an old continental quilt and used a strop, and he just lifted them out and placed them into the shallow pits that I dug. Shallow pits because, again, I want the roots to be proud of the soil surface. Olives like good drainage. Think of their habitats where they come from. Parched, arid soil. So this will enhance the drainage, but I was concerned that they'd been in those pots for a while, so I gave those root balls a really, really good soak before I backfilled with soil. I left the hose pipe on each one of those, I think for an hour on each one, so that the root ball could be completely drenched with water. And then I backfilled with soil, quite sandy soil actually, and that formed a mound, which, as you can see in a moment, the mound means that they get good drainage. But whilst they are getting established, they do want water, so I sunk these 3 terracotta pots, and that makes sure the water gets to the roots. Hope you've enjoyed this little tour of last year's projects. Looking forward to the spring now, and I will see you very soon for some more house and garden adventures. Bye for now.